Hi, I'm Tim. I'm one of the pastors here at our church, and just wanted to come this afternoon and give you a little bit of an update as to what we're doing when we reopen and some of the rationale behind that. I know that as we talk about this, I'm pretty sure we're going to have a mixed response like everything that's happening in the world around us. Everybody's got different opinions and reactions. Some of you are going to be like, it's about time, why have you been waiting so long? Some of you are going to be like, are you really already? And why these precautions? Why not these precautions? And so I just want to mention right up front that obviously you've been praying about this. We've been praying about it. We've talked to a lot of people. We've talked to E-Free leaders and some of the people, that are some of you in our congregation who are healthcare providers and experts in different areas. We try to get a lot of advice going into this decision. And the elders had a meeting about a week ago, which we talked through different options, and this is where we've landed. We are planning to reopen on June 7th, a week, next weekend, and I'll give you some more details about that later, but just before that, as you know, everything is changing all the time. The experts are telling us different things depending on what's the latest research and whatever article we read or see. So in the process of all these changes, I think we just need some guiding principles. And I'm indebted to some of our national leaders in the Free Church to give some really good insights about this. So one of the principles that should guide us, obviously, maybe it isn't obvious, but it should be what's our mission and how is reopening our church going to help us with our mission. As you know, our mission is to honor God by making disciples of Jesus, starting in Eastern Monroe County, then throughout the world. And so that means we've emphasized, especially this year, that we're sent to love our community, to serve them, to care for them, to reach them. And one of the principles that helps guide us is I think about the reference in 1 Peter where Peter's viewing believers as aliens and strangers in the world, and he said, when you're accused, the goal is that you live such good lives that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day He visits us. So that should inform how does reopening and the timing of it help or hinder our witness. There's a question that we've often asked, it's been around for a while, is if your church ceased to exist, what would be the reaction of your community? And if the reaction is indifferent, well, that's a problem because they didn't even know anything about us. But if it was sad, that'd be a good thing. They'd miss us because they have seen our good deeds and they've seen our impact on our community. On the other hand, if we ceased to exist and they were happy, that would be a really big problem. So as we think about a reopening, if we go too fast, if we're reckless, we don't want to be one of those headlines, and you've seen some of them, where we became a spreader event and the news was not good, and if we're not careful, we could undo decades of our goodwill in our community. So that's going to guide our timing and our ongoing discussions. And actually, as the elders were talking about this and some of the feedback we got from you in the survey, there was a little bit of a balance toward being cautious, not being too aggressive and too fast. So that certainly guides us. What helps our mission? Second principle would be what's safe, and maybe kind of a part of that is what's legal. Although legal and laws may change, and there's different levels of laws. Some are guidelines, some are just common sense, principles. And in some ways, whatever the law says and whatever the judges say, we still need to follow some of the common sense guidelines from health providers, organizations like the CDC and some of our health, Department of Health people. And nothing has really changed in terms of what we know so far about this, and that is there's going to be some principles that we're going to be getting used to living with for a while at least, and that is social distancing. You've all heard this. Face masks recommended. Cleaning protocols have to be improved. And of course, the goal is not to eliminate the risk. That's impossible. But some of the things that we're seeing, and the evidence is still out, are given to help us reduce risk. You can't eliminate risk, but maybe you can begin to reduce it. And a lot of these guidelines we're not used to, we're a little bit uncomfortable with, and they're inconvenient, and we might say, I don't want to mess with that. Well, I guess all I would say is think back to when seatbelts came into being and bike helmets. When I was a kid, nobody had helmets for their bikes. Now, if you see a kid riding a bike right now without a helmet, you probably think their parents are abusive. But you haven't eliminated risk. But the evidence shows you've reduced risk, so we do those kinds of things because it helps reduce risk. So, by the way, if you see me smirking here, it's because I have somebody behind the camera who's also smirking at me, and I think he's texting me as we go. We'll talk about that later. So, what is safe? We're just trying to we can't eliminate risk, but we can, moderate some of the risk. Third principle really is more than related to that. It's internally, what's the loving thing to do? This really came, I wish I could have filmed one segment of our elder board meeting the other day when we were talking about how this is going to be hard and people aren't going to like this. Some of us don't like these guidelines. And one of the elders said, is this really going to be a problem? Because what would be the loving thing to do? If I'm sitting by somebody that I know is in the vulnerable class, they have an underlying health condition, and you're asking me to do something, am I going to insist that I don't want to do that because it's inconvenient? His opinion was, I think we would do that. We would give up our own preferences, our own rights, because that's what people do when they love each other. Christ did not come to be served, but to give up his life as a ransom. So what is the loving way that we can respond to this virus and some of the cautions we have to take? We're to be characterized, as again, most of you know, by love. And so what's the loving way to care for the people that are around us, that they may be uncomfortable if we're not following some of these guidelines, so why wouldn't we, out of love, be willing to sacrifice some of the things we might think is kind of foolish at this point. And we don't know in the long run. But in the meantime, we're going to try to do what's loving. The last principle, I think, goes back to mission, but it's more the idea of how do we do our mission with quality and effectiveness. What's the best way to fulfill our mission and be wise and be effective? And again, let me just emphasize, this is not a perfect plan. It's not a permanent plan. This is an interim plan, and it's probably going to change, although we're proposing this for the month of June, but we don't even know. But in the meantime, we're trying to balance being overly restrictive and unwelcoming, which kind of defeats the point of worship if we're feeling like we're coming down strictly. But on the other hand, we don't want to be just wide open and foolish. So again, in the context of this, remember the purpose of church isn't just worship. So it's not just about doing whatever we can to get back together to worship, but there's balance. Our purpose is to make disciples. And so even as we implement this, we are encouraging you, as we lay out these guidelines, continue to gather in small groups. Maybe it will be a better way for you to worship and to make disciples, to use these resources online. We're going to begin putting the service online, the music, the children's talk, the message, the entire service online. So it might be better and more of a quality experience for you to continue to worship at home or to gather together in small groups and do it that way. So with all of that, here's the plan, and the details of this are coming out as soon as this is uploaded this afternoon. We'll be on the website and you can see some of it in writing. And I encourage you to start looking it over. And if you have questions, you can email me or the office. I think at this point, Neil and I are planning, we'll come back on Monday or Tuesday. We'll maybe do a little talk update about some of the questions, texts that you have, all the texts except Neil's, by the way. And so the plan is this: we're gonna have 3 services. The first service will be at 8:30 in the sanctuary, and we will We will be following some of the social distancing guidelines, face masks encouraged. We will try to limit the size. We're going to invite you to register for the service on Eventbrite. We're asking you to do that for all the services. And then that will be the service that's videoed for the evening service, which will be the same kind of format, pretty size controlled. And the 8:30 and the evening service are really more for people, if you're like, I am uncomfortable, I do want to be cautious, those would be the services that you would come to. We're going to try to follow more of those guidelines. But we also recognize there may be another group of us who are just like, we just want to be together, we don't want to have as much of the size limitation. So we're going to do an outdoor service at 10:30, and it will be out on the patio back when we have the baptism service here at church. That's where we have met. And it will be kind of a picnic style, bring your own chairs. We'll have a few chairs set up, but we encourage you to bring your own chairs. We're going to try to get you spread out. We'll still do some of the social distancing and those kind of guidelines. And we'll see how that works. There are other details about what to expect and when you come. I'm not going to get into all of those right now. But one thing we'll treat, if it's a rain day, we'll treat it like a snow day, except that if you've pre-registered then for the outdoor service, we'll have an indoor service, but that will be more controlled in terms of size limits. So I'm sure you're going to have questions about this or comments. If you do, I encourage you to email us, and we'll process them and try to give you some answers and updates or rationale as to why. Again, I just want to I know that we all are going to have and have had different opinions about what's happening. And the bottom line is we don't know a lot about this virus yet. I was at a funeral, my mother-in-law's funeral, and there was a person there who knew a professor, a medical school professor from Northwestern Medical School, and he asked him, how much do we know? How much do you think we know about this virus? And he was hoping he'd say, of everything there is to know about the virus, how much do you think we know? And our friend was saying, well, I hope we know like 50%. That's what he was hoping would be the answer. And the answer was, I think we know about 10% of what we will someday know about this virus. So there's a lot of things we don't know, so we have a lot of opinions floating around. And so I would just come back to encouraging you to be committed around our unity in Christ. We're going to have some disagreements, and that's okay. We can agree to disagree and still be united around Christ. And I would challenge you to be willing to give up your preferences for the sake of the body. And also, please be patient. We're figuring this out. I've used the word, it's kind of muddy and murky, but we're trying this, and be patient. We'll be learning as we go. In the meantime, thanks for your commitment to God and His work through you and us. We are the body, the church, Bible Evangelical Free Church. Thanks.